Good morning, dear friends. It is Isru Chag, the day that follows Shavuos, the 8th of Sivan, the 7th of June. We're gathered after a 3-day break, which 2 days probably would have been a break anyways, because Shabbos and Sunday. But we're gathered here to resume our study of the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Maseches Shabbos, chapter 16, page 120. 120 in Maseches Shabbat. And we are starting a new Mishnah. Just to refresh your memory briefly, the previous Mishnah began by talking about food that is salvaged in a fire, 3 meals, which led to a whole lengthy discussion about what meals one is obligated to have on Shabbos, different opinions, reward, punishment, etc., etc. The Gemara is now going to come back to the center and continue to talk about salvaging in the face of a fire. Just to point out that before we hit record, we gave a fast review of our Kibbud Avayim discussion of Shavuos night. And, just to tease those that aren't here in person and are listening to the recording, but you're welcome to reach out privately. I'll be happy to share what we have on that. So I would say that we're back to the more typical Talmud style that we are used to after a many-day detour, which was more agadic and just a different kind of style. Today, we'll get back into the back and forth of the Talmud, the analysis, the conversation, the debate. And I just want to say that it's super appropriate that following Shavuos, a holiday that's about recommitting ourselves to Torah study, not only Torah Shebichtav, not only the written Torah, but the oral Torah, that we honor the wonderful members of this Chabura who devote in an admirable and committed way time to study to the Talmud on a daily basis. And so let's dedicate today's learning to the well-being of our dearest members of our Chabura and their households, and prayerful wishes for good health and good circumstances for all. And now that Rabbi Allen, you have mazel, because we were waiting for you. Well, we weren't waiting for you, but you happened to come on the moment that we're starting to study the actual Talmud. So welcome. We hope you had a good Yantif. Here's the Mishnah. Kuf Chaf Amad Aleph 128. That's chapter 16 of Maseches Shabbos. Actually, Matzilin Sal Maleki Karais. So as soon as I translate, or you see already the translation, you're going to be struck by a question, but hold the instinct to ask the question because the Gemara is going to ask it. Matzilin Sal Maleki Karais. One is allowed to save a whole basket full of loaves of bread. Although it contains 100 meals worth of bread. The eagle shall vela, one may save a massive cake of figs, which were typically very large. Or maybe they come in different sizes, but we're talking about a large one that contains multiple meals. Chavis shall yayin, and a whole barrel of wine, which for most people is more than what they can consume in a single Shabbos. And he can also invite others and tell them, hey, come save some wine, bread, food for yourself. They could take it for themselves, but bring it back to the owner, and thus he ends up walking away with more of his store of food salvaged. If the people that are helping him out are clever, they can charge him. They can earn a buck off of this fire-saving endeavor. I know it sounds a little opportunistic. A guy Nebuch is dealing with a fire. You want to help him out, and then you want to charge him afterwards. But let's see what the Gemara has to say on this later on in the Gemara, especially in the light of the fact that they could keep it themselves. So, but that's going to come in the Gemara. Now, you have a fire and you're saving this food from the fire. Where may you bring the food? So once again, as you may recall, and I know we read this in passing on Friday, where may one save the food to? Where do you take it? You take it out of the burning building. Where do you place it down? Or asked differently, under which circumstances may one take the food out of the fire? When you're taking it into a chatzar ha'me'oreves. You're taking it into a courtyard that has an eruv. Rashi tells us, what's the chiddush? Of course you can save into an eruv. Well, no. Va'afilu hachi, even though you're carrying in the most beautifully permissible way. There is never a restriction on carrying in an Eruv. There is an Eruv which creates and causes the courtyard between multiple homes to be a common space, and one is permitted to carry. You can always carry from your home into there. And even though it is totally permissible to carry, you still should not carry more than a certain amount. Because the person is utterly panicked to save his stuff from the fire, if we'll not put any limit, he'll end up putting the fire out. And so it's a big chiddush, it's a big limiting, quite a restrictive principle. Then Beseira disagrees, but Beseira Omer, one is even permitted to save food out of a fire to a chotzer she'ena me'oreves, to a courtyard which has not had an eruv created. It's enclosed. It just doesn't have a eruv, which we've described as a common collection of food or something that creates a united a united entity between all of the people who live in the chotzer.
We have background noise, Rabbi.
Here, I'm going to hit mute all. Thank you for reminding me. As always, please unmute for questions, comments, insights, etc. So the Mishnah has a machloikas. We say that one is only allowed to, we say that one is allowed to save from the fire. But where can you save it? Either to a chatzar that has an eruv or to a chatzar that doesn't have an eruv. Ulesham moitzi kol klei tashmishai, and a person is also allowed to take out their cutlery, their plates, their forks. Rashi klei tashmishai shetzrichim lo oisai hayom kegoin kaisais vikitonios. You save your food, but you don't have your cutlery, your silverware, your cups. You're not going to be able to consume it. So you take out the food, and you can also salvage your dishes. The loivesh. Interesting. The Mishnah says.
I have a question. It says even into a courtyard that doesn't have an eruv. I mean, if it has an eruv, what's the question? That's
the Rashi we read. There's a chiddush that you're even restricted if there's an eruv, according to the Tanakama. That's a massive chiddush, which is what you're pointing out with your question.
I understand.
Shocking.
But why should it be even a question?
I'm sorry?
Why should it be an issue even?
Because as Rashi points out, when a person is in a panic, they'll end up putting out the fire. So the Chazal hit the brake, create restrictions around what one can save, even in an utterly permissible way. Meaning, you can empty out your entire house every Shabbos into the chutzner, and you have not carried on a random Shabbos. But if there's a fire, all of a sudden there are additional regulations, as Rashi here points out, mitoch shabahu. But your question explains why Ben Beseira strongly disagrees. Ben Beseira says, what do you mean? When we know that the Chazal made a gzeira about saving stuff, obviously that was only in the event where there wasn't the proper eruv. If there's an eruv, that's like, a no-brainer. So I think the Ben Beseira is identifying with your question. But for whatever reason, the Tanakama disagrees or inspires your question. And so that's how Rashi explains the Gemara. And I think, for now, we'll stick with Rashi. But that's a very good question. And it's a question that's so compelling. Rashi gives us the explanation. And again, Ben Beseira disagrees, apparently. Ulasham Maitzi Kol Klei Tashmishay. And you carry out all of your dishes, your utensils. What does Kol Tashmishay mean? Does it mean your whole kitchen? Does it mean your whole kitchen or only a certain amount? So here's where I'm confused. Rashi says Kol Klei Tashmishay. Any dish, Rashi says, that's needed on Shabbos. But the word kol kli tashmishay sounds like your all of your cutlery, all of your dishes. So maybe what Rashi is saying is not about a number, but a type of dish. If you're going to need it on Shabbos, you could take. We'll see soon. I'm just sharing with you my question. The loivesh kol masha yachal ilbaish. You can put on as much clothing as your body can wear. Have you ever seen a person when you're flying that was overweight and they make them take stuff out of their suitcase and they have coats in there, so they put on the coats and they're putting on their, so you can wear whatever you'd like. The oitiv kol mashiach latoif, and he could wrap himself in any clothing that he could wear. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi Omer Shemaina Asar Kelim. One is limited. Once there are 18 garments, you got to stop. The chayzer v'loy v'shemoitzi. You can go outside, take it off, and then go back inside. Rashi. The Gemara is going to explain. You can only wear a full wardrobe that is typically worn in the weekday. But more than 18 garments, which I guess were 18 garments that were part of a typical 3-piece suit, let's say, you can't take out.
Rabbi, there's a few things here I don't understand.
Okay.
I find very hard to understand. In those days, I'm trying to put myself in a home in those days. All right. So you've got the stove is on, and the stove is the heating area of the whole house. And the top of the stove is very hot, and cooking is going on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a possibility of oil dripping onto the stove to cause a fire. Then there's the lanterns that are all over the place with oil. So a fire can start very quickly. So what are we supposed to do? What is somebody supposed to do? Do they save the Torah scrolls, the Chumash and the Tanakh and all those books, or do they save the
what
food?
the hierarchy, what the order of priorities are?
Well, what would you think?
Well, first of all, most people probably didn't have a Torah scroll in their house in those days.
But they had books, religious books.
No, most people didn't. Unless
No?
you're a big scholar, most people did, because it was all handwritten. So there was actually a very big shortage of written works. Actually, there's a mitzvah for every Jew to write a Torah scroll, and it actually makes more sense in those days where no one had it. Their works were very scarce, that a person would want to. But so you're asking a very good question. What is the hierarchy of priority? What goes first? What goes second? The Mishnah of the Gemara has not yet addressed that, so let's leave that open. I suppose we could say that by the order of the Mishnayos, right, starting off with Kisvei Kodesh, and Alan, I think someone else asked this before too, so it's a good question. I suppose we could infer from the order of the Mishnah that we would prioritize works of Torah, except a person needs to survive. What good is a Torah book if you drop dead of hunger? And so I suppose it's going to be relative to the person's situation. So at this point, we have not established a hierarchy of priority. But it's a good question, and let's see if we'll get any clues in the coming days.
When a woman, when there is a fire and the woman chooses to take out loaves of bread and everything, she can't carry the loaves of bread in her hands because a bunch of loaves of bread, they'll slip out. So is she allowed to put them on a tray
But did you look what the Mishnah said? We're talking about a basket full of loaves, right?
Okay.
So that's what we're talking about.
Good thing they said basket.
I have a different question.
Go
When
ahead.
it says, 18, he can put on 18 layers of clothing and take them out, and then come back, take them off, come back in and take another 18. So 2 questions. Why Dafka 18? And that's playing games. If you're telling me I can bring out 18 and then go in and bring another 18, just tell me I can bring in 36, I can bring that 100. I mean, what's with the gays? We're bringing only out.
So I'll tell you what
18,
Rashi says, and I'll tell you what he tells us to wait for the Gemara. So the Gemara is going to discuss this more at length. So as far as the question about why, let's wait for the Gemara to explain it. But as far as the number 18, Rashi gave us a clue. 18 was considered part of a perfect wardrobe. So it sounds like you're talking. We'll see the Gemara, but basically, a person might wear a whole bunch of different garments, a suit and a vest and a tie and a yarmulke and a hat and a kerchief and a socks, 2 socks, and maybe we could find out. We could figure out a way, even in modern times, that a person might conceivably wear 18 different pieces of clothing. But let's see. The Gemara will break it down.
Rabbi, I think he's making the point the other way, that you shouldn't put on more than normal. If I look at the
That's what Rabbi
Hebrew
Yossi is saying. You should only wear what is conceivably normal.
Yeah,
You
not
couldn't
to
put on 6
look
pairs
to
of
put
pants.
on 18 if you don't need it. Yeah,
No, 18 is conceivably a standard,
right.
conventional. But to put on 6 pairs of pants and 5 shirts and 2 coats, that we're saying not to. Now the question, Rebberal, is if we're talking Babel or Miami, people wear less clothing. But if you're talking about bundling up in the dead of winter,
I'm surprised, Rabbi, that nobody makes the point, whatever you do, don't risk your life.
that's obvious. That's in between every line over here. Right?
People need to be told that. We have cases many times where people get injured, etc., to save property.
I wanted to show you, because I might have read the Gemara a little, the Mishnah, the last line of the Mishnah. I just want to reread it for you. You have a machlokes. One opinion says loivish kol mashiach. Rabbi Yossi says only Shemona Esrei kelim, right? And we said v'chayzer v'loivish u'moitzi. You can go on and put on more clothing. So I said that's Rabbi Yossi's opinion, but Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says v'einai poishton lachzer v'lul v'shel hatz lachem. Rabbi Yossi says you can save 18 garments of clothing and you're done. When the Mishnah says v'chayzer v'loivish, this is according to the opinion that says you can put on as much as you want. So he is double. The first opinion that says you can put on as many garments is doubly flexible. You can put on any garment you want. You can take them off and go back in if the fire is not so that it's dangerous. But according to Rabbi Yossi, you can only wear that which is the standard convention of wearing. This is the Mishnah. As is the job of the Mishnah, it's raised more questions than answers. And that's affords us the opportunity to have a wonderful journey in the Talmud as we attempt to decipher, to interpret our Mishnah. So again, our Mishnah continues a line of Mishnahs that are discussing what to do in the event of fire. The previous Mishnah talked about how you have to save 3 meals worth of food. This Mishnah talks about the potential for larger units of food bundled together. A basket full of loaves of bread. And I'm envisioning, although maybe it's wrong, those French, the baguettes in a big basket. So I'm imagining the guy carrying out a basket full of baguettes. Maybe I'm envisioning it wrong, but that's, and we talk about a large round unit of compressed figs, dried figs, or a whole barrel. So we're talking now about larger quantities. When is there a license to salvage larger quantities than the baseline that was established in the previous Mishnah? So, of course, the first line of business for our Gemara is to compare and contrast the previous Mishnah and this Mishnah. Why in the previous Mishnah we were so limited to 3 meals, and now all of a sudden you can have 100 meals worth. What's happening? So that's going to be the first line of business. Whereas for Tana le Reisha Shalish Seudais Vesulai. Don't you remember we had a previous Mishnah that says 3 meals, no more. And all of a sudden we have another Mishnah that says 100 meals. What's going on? Which one is it? Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, like Kasha, it's not really contradictory. Not a problem. Kan bibola hatzil. Here is where you're coming to grab to save 1 unit. Let's see Rashi. He's grabbing one unit, one item, a basket full of bread. He's doing a single motion to save an item from the fire. So he should save everything that's in the fire. It's a single motion. Take it up and take it out. So what do I care how much is in it? Whereas the previous Mishnah is about assembling. Kan b'bala kapel. The previous Mishnah is the guy is grabbing stuff. Rashi, Salim Harbe, Ze'im Zeh. He's gathering, combining multiple items. V'lachsar lahoitzi mazing shalish sudos. Hu diyachol lahatzil b'salim harbe v'suloi shekol echad terch b'atzmil. So long story short, the previous Mishnah, the person is grabbing multiple items, and for that there is a strong restriction. But one single item, we are less inclined, we are not inclined to create any restrictions. This is the explanation out of the gate that the Gemara gives to compare between the two Mishnahs. And this is the explanation given by Rav Huna.
Rabbi, does it mention the case where a fire can come about in a synagogue?
I'm sorry?
Do they mention the case where a fire can come out, can start in a synagogue?
Not explicitly, but it's but the same halachas apply, like we talk about Kisei Kodesh, right? So although it's not explicit, the assumption is that likely such an event is more likely to happen in a shul than in a private home. But we don't have a specific mention. It should be noted, we're constantly, because this is a group of people, our Chabura here, we have a number of people like myself that are interested in archaeology. And so we frequently will see a posting from Israel about a new discovery. And so we know that there were not many shuls, if any, in the time of the Second Temple, and they only started developing. It's not true. There were a few synagogues, but there were very few. And the idea of a synagogue starts developing after the fall of the temple and the Roman sacking of Jerusalem. And so it's possible that at the time the Mishnah was composed, the idea of a shul was still under development, if you will. I may be very wrong, but so I don't think we get a special mention in this Mishnah about a base Knesset, but it would appear that the same laws would apply. The license to salvage from fire would be the same whether it's a home or a shul, I believe. So again, Rav Huna gives a beautiful, simple
in the Mishnah, they would want, I guess it was in Brachos where they're talking about the times of davening, because they used to daven out in the fields, and they didn't want people to stay late on like Erev Shabbos to have to walk home alone, so they added extra tefillas for everybody.
No, they had, but you could see it's still under.
So that was more in an open air as opposed to being a building.
Right. Well, the thing that they did have, which I think is really Alan's question, is the base medrash, which did exist. So I was cheaply getting out of answering the question, but for whatever reason, the Mishnah doesn't seem to mention dafka shuls or base medrash. But anyways, back to our discussion here. The distinction is if the person is scrambling, puttering around on their fire. And by the way, even for fire safety, we could appreciate this. To grab one item while you're running out, so gesund. But to grab multiple items there, we're going to put the brakes on solidly. Because if you take too much time, it's not going to be good. You see, Kan b'bola hatzil, kan b'bola kapel. One Mishnah is that you're saving one item, and one is that you're collecting. B'bola hatzil, if you're coming to save one item, hatzil's kulam. We're not going to ask you to take the time to start unloading stuff from the basket, right? Bola kapel, but if he's collecting, let's see how Rabbi Steinsaltz translates it. Yeah, collecting. If you're scrambling around, grabbing stuff, 3 meals, no more. Rabbi Abba bar Zavda Amarav. So we have another explanation. Idi v'idi b'bola kapel. Maybe each Mishnah is talking about that you have to gather stuff. But yet, like Kashya, kan la'isa chatzar, it depends where you're taking it to. If you're taking it to the same chatzar, kan la'chatzar acheres. If you're keeping it in one chatzar, there's one law, but if you have to take it to another chatzar, then we will be more restrictive. Why? Because it takes more time, I guess. You're schlepping all the way far away from the fire, I suppose. So we have two ways of deciphering the Mishnah. I'm going to end. Oh, it's still early, but I have to go in like a minute or two. So let's close out the unit here. Boy, Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua. Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua asked the question. Perish talisoi, v'kipel v'niach. What happens if he uses his talis like a blanket at a picnic? You wrap everything up. So then he's saving it all into the same central unit. Do we look at this as a scenario where it's essentially all in one basket? Or do we look at the guy that's gathering stuff and coming and going and coming and going? On one hand, he's turned it into a single basket. But on the other hand, he's busy collecting. Let's read Rashi. I guess he's still shopping around the home. So do we say it's kevola hatzil dami hoyo ve'en kan ela kliyacha b'pamachas u'maitziyam? Ultimately, he's going to make one exit, but it's not an assembled basket. I guess that's the point. Previously, I at least envisioned that we're talking about a basket that's already full of food, so that you're just grabbing and going. But here you are assembling the basket under fire. So do we look at it like you're saving a single item? Meaning that ultimately he's busy running back and forth. So we have the two polar extremes. We have everything's already pre-collected in a basket and you're just running out. I suppose in modern times, it would be more like a box full of stuff. Then you have the case where the guy's literally taking the food, running outside, putting it down, going back inside, back and forth. And in that scenario, we're extremely restrictive. And now we found what looks like a middle ground. It's going to be one exit, but he's rummaging around the kitchen now under fire. What's the halacha? So the Gemara is going to give an answer based on a statement, a teaching of Rav. Let's read this carefully. Midamar Rav, Atir Rav Shizvi le Rav Chisda v'Darash. Bilvad shelo yavi kli shu machzik yosim mishalish su'udos. Rava says that Rav Chisda was misled by Rav Shizvi. When Rav Chisda said that there is a restriction to the size of the talis or the keli that's collecting, and this is a wrong statement, from here we see that ultimately one is allowed to collect as much as possible from the fire, unlike the assertion in this faulty statement. Indeed, you may do so. Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz, although usually I like to read Rashi first, but let's see Rabbi Steinsaltz, and then we can look at Rashi. The Gemara attempts to resolve the dilemma based on what Rava said. What did Rava say? That Rav Shizvi tricked or misled Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said a halacha regarding a barrel that breaks on a roof. And he says you're allowed to bring a keli to catch the wine, but it cannot hold more than 3 meals. And the fact that Rava said that Rav Chisda's restriction to only having 3 meals is a mistake, because Rava really believes you can take a single basket of any volume. From here we infer that it's like one who comes to rescue, and so you can carry more than a limited volume. So Rava says this teaching that says that you can only take out a limited amount is wrong. From here we infer that Rava says you can save as much as you would like. Rashi, there was a discussion between Rav Shizvi and Rav Chisda about the Mishnah we discussed and learned previously. If a a barrel breaks on the roof, maybe Kli Omaniach Tachtav. Rav Shizvi said, the vessel to save should only contain 3 meals. Rav Chisda agreed. And Rava says that it was a mistake. Shma mina to usahu. From here we see that it was a mistake. And the halacha is, even if you can contain many meals, mutar kivan the chad manahu, you can save it because it's a single keli. The high kimekapel, and it's a good analogy to the person that is saving stuff from the fire by collecting it. Because the way a leaking barrel works is it drops drip by drip, similar enough to the collecting and placing into a single basket. So from here we infer, and at least the opinion of Rava is that you're allowed to take a lot of stuff into a single basket, into a single talis. And when the Mishnah says that you're only allowed to save 3 meals, we're describing where you are running in and out of the burning building, which is generally not advisable under most circumstances. My dear friends, I'm sorry to end just a few minutes early here.
Okay, before you run off,
okay,
I have my usual Klaus Kasha.
I'm probably going to leave the answer till next time, but go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. How come nobody asks the question, who does the stuff belong to? You go into a fire, you grab all kinds of stuff. Is it yours automatically? Implicit
from the Mishnah's language, it's a good question, is that we're talking about the person himself. And actually, we did ask this question. I have to find where we read it. But basically, the language of the Mishnah is the person is saving his own stuff. He can call others to be involved in salvaging too. So inferred is that it's typically talking about a person's own possessions.
No, when you talk about a basket of loads, this could be a fire in a bakery.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to run, but
gentlemen, run like a thief. Have a great day. Shakoya. Thanks.